everybody. Welcome back to the Catholic Culture Podcast. Today's guest is a returning guest. Her name is Jane Greer, and she is a poet. I had her on previously to discuss her compilation of poems, Love Like a Conflagration, which was her first publication in many years. She had been away from poetry for decades before returning to it, and a triumphant return. A lot of people really loved that collection, and she has a great story. So if you want to hear that, you can listen to my first interview with her, which is titled Love Like a Conflagration. But in this episode, we'll be discussing her new collection, The World as We Know It Is Falling Away. And it is a great follow-up to that acclaimed collection. So welcome back to the show, Jane.
Thank you. It's really nice to be back.
I wanted to ask about your week in Pittsburgh, because it sounds like you've been very busy with this book launch. How's that been going?
Oh, it's been wonderful. I need a week in bed when I get home, but I did a reading at La Roche University and Franciscan University. I participated in the Beatrice Institute's 2 nights of poetry called Holy Slang, and I was in another Steubenville event on Sunday, which was many poets put on. It was put on by Suzanne Lewis, many poets, many young people who want to learn poetry. So yeah, it's been wonderful. Oh, and on our way home, I will be reading at University of St. Thomas in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Oh, great. Why don't we go ahead and start with a poem from this book? The book is divided into 2 sections. The first is the titular section, The World as We Know It Is Falling Away. And the second is, how do you pronounce it?
Kadash, Kadash, Kadash.
Kadash, Kadash, Kadash. Okay. So this poem is from the first section, and it is called I Lived in Paradise.
I seem to break a bone once in a while, and I had a poem in Love Like a Conflagration about a broken bone, and it was called After the Fall. I Lived in Paradise is on the surface, it's about another broken bone and lessons that I did not learn after my first broken bone. So here is, I lived in paradise. I lived in paradise, and then I fell. Outside of paradise can seem like hell. The falling took no time, an idle thought, a heedless act, and then the instant swell of brass and timpani and angels grieving. Then just as swiftly only my own breath, distant, hesitant, and so deceiving, as if all were still well if I were breathing. Outside those gates, the salt has lost its salt. In my no longer innocent gestalt, I know that all this harm and sorrow happened through my fault, my most grievous fault.
Maybe we can keep going then with this fall theme. There's a poem that you wrote, let me just find it, Surviving Consolation, which is in the second section of the book.
Okay. This poem has an epigraph from Saint Ignatius of Loyola, from the 10th rule on the discernment of spirits. And the epigraph is, let him who is in consolation think how he will conduct himself in the desolation which will come after, taking new strength for then. And this poem is called Surviving Consolation. 1. The Romans had it right, placing a slave, in the gilded chariot beside the hero at his triumph. Women waved and flowers flew, and a sea of strong men cried the hero's name like a god's name, and the drone of eloquent encomiums proceeded, while the crouching slave, for the hero's ears alone, murmured the other words the hero needed. Remember that you will die. In the grip of bliss, acclaim, and power, don't get too used to this. 2. Believe me, I've been thinking, this can't last. These good things raining down, layer on layer, the pleasure and the praise, too much, too fast, too breathtaking to let out any prayer except, I praise you, Lord. I bless your name for this euphoric rush. I glorify, adore, and thank you, thank you. My blue flame burns like a votive candle gone awry. 3. I crave the gift more than I crave the giver, and I am immoderate. On tasting glory, I want more, and I want it over and over. Mine is a mythic and a much-told story. We know what happens next in all such cases, a falling down, or, seen in a different way, a rescue by a God whose wild embraces may be withdrawn if they lead us astray. 4. I sow the seeds of my falling down, fingering like a silver charm the thought that I deserve renown. Thus do I pinch grace into harm. 5. My God will rescue me. Before the fact of what is coming, my overwhelming thought is to talk myself down gently. Brace for impact. This is going to hurt. This is going to hurt a lot.
Okay, thanks for reading that. Well, I can't not ask about the autobiographical aspects of these poems, which you already referred to. Now you had this, seems to be a reference to the great success you had with your previous collection, and the fact that you took a pretty bad fall and were spending months recovering from that in the interim between that book and this one. So how do you relate then, if I may ask, the spiritual theme to the actual literal fall that you took?
Well, this was written before my most recent fall. So,
oh, really? Okay.
But it is about love like a conflagration, because I did have my 15 minutes of fame with that book.
Mm-hmm.
And I caused a little bit of action on Twitter. And even saying that now, it sounds ridiculous. But
cringy, as they say.
Yes, but yeah, very cringy. But those things did happen, and I wasn't comfortable with it, but I knew I could get comfortable with it, and I didn't really want to, and I knew I liked it, but I didn't like it, and so I knew it couldn't last. A lot of my poems are about things that just can't last or don't last. So, yeah, this is connected to that first book. Okay.
So, yeah, it was before the fall. That's interesting, because I was reading this thinking it was written after your most recent injury, and thinking, trying to figure out, well, how could she have anticipated that, so to speak, but it sounds like it's an experience that you've had more than once, so that, the analogy sort of is still a concrete one.
Well, sure, I've had more than one fall, but I've had more than one comeuppance too. So, which is kind of what this poem is about.
Yeah. So like, how did you combat those temptations after your first book?
Well, they went away. They stopped. I had my 15 minutes, and then life
Okay.
went back to normal, and that was very good.
So that is part of what you're warning yourself about.
Yes.
In the poem.
Yes. Not violence or injury, but just this can't last.
I see. So it was less of a cataclysmic fall than might be thought.
It was a gentle fall.
Yeah. But maybe more so because you warned yourself and prepared yourself for it.
Yeah. I think
well, let me
that
ask,
the Romans did that was brilliant. That the Romans used to do that. Just so wise. Even though those men were practically made gods when they won a war, still they had the little voice in their ear saying, don't get used to this. You're going to die someday.
Yeah. I wanted to ask, Jane, you've been writing poems for a long time. You had a collection decades ago that was then republished as part of your previous collection, Love Like a Conflagration, when you returned to writing poetry. I know that, I guess in poetry, probably a lot of the way that you study the craft is simply to write more poems. But can I ask, is there something that you worked on? Like, how do you feel your poetry has developed since the last collection? What is there anything that you've been trying to gain in the craft since then?
I don't point myself in a certain direction. This book is very different from Love Like a Conflagration because it was made up really of two books, a very, very old book from 1986, and then the other half of the book was newer poems, but some of them weren't really, really new. And so this book is completely new poems. And to me, it feels like where Conflagration was heading. Like it's a perfect partner for Conflagration, or a perfect bookend.
Do you mean that in terms of subject matter, or, I mean, obviously there's similarities in subject matter, but is that the case in terms of craft or form as well, in some sense?
I'm hoping that my craft keeps growing. I guess I was talking more about themes and cohesiveness. It's more cohesive as a book than Conflagration was.
I see. Are there any new verse forms that you tried your hand at that you hadn't worked with before in this collection?
Yes, a couple. He paces in terms of rima. He paces.
Okay.
And that was ridiculously difficult. I don't know how Dante did it. It was so difficult. And my poems...
maybe we can read that one. Do you want to explain what terza rima is first?
Sure. Terza rima is where three lines that rhyme are interlaced with three other lines that rhyme, which are then interlaced with three other lines that rhyme. And I used true rhyme on some of the rhymes, but off rhyme on some of the other ones.
Okay, interesting.
About killed me.
Well, yeah, let's hear that.
Okay. He paces. There is a line. To cross the line is sin. To want to cross the line is sin. To ache for the line to never have been dreamed or drawn, that too is sin. It is a grave mistake to wish you different, Lord, and sin is death. But she is my heart's hot core, my slumber's wreck, my ruin, my rapture, and my ragged breath, my deepest wound, my own self halved and healed, the cataclysm and the aftermath, all your whirling firmament revealed, fruit and fruition I cannot live without, glad homecoming for one too long exiled. And you, what were you trying to bring about, placing her naked there in front of me when you had drawn that line? Lord, do you gloat at your servant all unstrung? Your treachery stings. Why am I teased and then denied? I whom you anointed when I was a boy. Am I to consider your line some great divide? I could cross over in a single stride.
So yeah, terza rima, I guess it's ABA, BCB, CDC, something like that.
Yes, yes.
So the rhyme of the last word of the second line provides the first and third rhyme of the next tercet.
Yes.
The next three line stanza. Okay, so obviously this is about David and Bathsheba. Did you decide, I'm going to write a terza rima, I'm going to try my hand at this, and then find a subject matter? Did you, have both ideas simultaneously? Is there any particular reason you would say that the subject matter is fitting for this form? Just curious about how you put it all together.
I had this subject in mind, and if I remember, I wrote the first 4 lines, and they were exactly what I wanted them to be. But every word was exactly what I wanted, but the rhyme just seemed very difficult to me. And then all of a sudden I realized that it was the beginning of a terza rima. So then I thought, okay, I'm going to jump into the deep end here and see if I can do this. So I guess you could say that the poem kind of made itself or required that I make it a terza rima, because the beginning of it, I didn't want to change a word of it. So I had to go with it.
Interesting. So yeah, it organically sort of began moving in that direction, and then you decided to structure that for the rest of the poem. How often for you is the form like sort of inherently related to the content in terms of the and by form I mean the large scale structure, the rhyme scheme, meter, that kind of stuff, as opposed to individual sort of sonic things you might do with words? Obviously that can be directly related to the material of the moment, the content of any given line. But I mean a big picture form, how often is that like really sort of directly related or suitable to the content in your mind?
I don't think that I ever start out thinking, okay, this subject needs to be a sonnet. This subject needs to be in terza rima because of the subject that it is.
Right.
But once it starts to happen and I see the form, then the form seems right. I originally titled this The Process. And because, again, we're talking tercets, we're talking threes. So the first part of this poem is David knowing that he shouldn't do this, he can't do this. Then the second part is, oh, but I really want to, I really have to. And then the third part is him doing it. And so it seemed like I saw that happening as I was writing, and I liked it.
Yeah. It seems like the frustration of human beings butting up against divinely ordained limits to things
Yes.
is a constant theme of this collection.
It is. And that too is something that I kind of didn't realize until I started putting this collection together.
Listeners, let me take a moment to tell you about Catholic Culture's 2022 fall campaign. As you may know, the Catholic Culture podcast is a production of CatholicCulture.org, which has been one of the most reliable, independently run Catholic apostolates online since it started in 2003. And these days we're entirely funded by donations, so naturally the fall campaign is a very crucial time for us to muster the support we need to continue our work. So this year I'm happy to say that we are announcing our largest fall challenge campaign ever. A group of key donors is offering a generous $111,000 to match every gift that's made between October 20th and December 8th, the Solemnity of the Immaculate Conception. But in order to win the challenge, we have to raise the total amount by the deadline or else we'll lose that matching grant. Catholic Culture has a lot more than just podcasts going on. It has daily Catholic news and commentary, a rich array of resources for living the liturgical year, and a vast library of Catholic documents. And this material reaches not just people in the US or the Anglosphere, but millions around the world. We often hear from priests in places like India and Africa who say that they use our materials in preparing their catechesis or their preaching. And again, all this work depends on our users and our listeners, so please do consider giving. Even a little bit counts, especially since until December 8th, your contribution will be doubled. To donate, you can go to CatholicCulture.org/donate/audio or just click the link in the description. But if this isn't the right time for you to donate monetarily, then we ask that you pray for us, just as we pray for all our listeners, viewers, readers, and benefactors daily. Thank you, and God bless you. Okay, well, in that case, maybe we can do, we could do more.
I don't think God minds it when we complain to him, because it means we're talking to him, and a lot of the time that's the best he's going to get from us, is some conversation in the form of a complaint. So this is a complaint. More. Clean and warm, a sleeping baby dies in his crib. We have not had enough of baby. We want more. A young barista perishes in a pileup. Just like that, she's gone into the vacuum we abhor. Slowly, an aged father dwindles, eases away too soon for us, if not for him, through a one-way door. Someone loves us, then they don't. And all our litanies of loss will not bring back what we had before. Love, health, memory, skill, ours, but not ours, we learn, in this long-lasting and uncivil war. Keep your cloudy eternity. We are not gluttons. All we want, right here, right now, is a long encore. The Lord giveth like a playground bully, taketh back grinning all his gifts, taketh back and doth not restore.
This is similar to the previous poems, similar to Heat Bases, in that it's the voice of a fallen humanity speaking. And what strikes me about the second to last stanza: keep your cloudy eternity. We are not gluttons. All we want right here, right now, is a long encore. The poem could be, I mean, that if taking that stanza, the poem could be easily called less, in a sense, you know.
Yes.
Because actually what's going on is that they are settling for less in a certain sense, or they're so focused on what we have here without realizing that they're doing that. But it sort of comes out. There's almost like an existential despair that comes out there. All we want is more of this. We're not greedy. Yes. We're not going to ask. We don't really believe we're going to get what you're promising us. So,
right.
Yeah. Who are some of your big influences, craft-wise?
I'm pretty widely read. I love a poem here, a poem there. My earliest influence, and I was about 12, was Edna St. Vincent
Oh,
Millay.
wow.
And she is so musical.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems to have gotten into my DNA a little bit. And I went through a period in my 20s, in high school and college, and kind of into my 20s when I wrote free verse, very, very free verse, because that's what was around me. That was what was surrounding me. But somehow Edna came through for me. And in my late 20s, I started writing verse with form, and I just never looked back, because the free verse just wasn't that interesting to write. It was it was prose, but it wasn't as good as prose. So
Right. Do you like that the poem by her? The only one I know is the one on Euclid. Euclid alone hath looked on beauty bare, I think is the first line.
Yes,
I thought
yes.
that was a pretty cool one. Yeah.
She has just wonderful poems.
Is there any particular one that's a favorite of yours?
Witch Wife.
Witch Wife?
Witch, WITCH. Witch Wife.
Okay, I'm gonna pull that one up. Just sort of curious.
It's a tiny poem. I like tiny poems. I write tiny poems.
Okay, I'm gonna read this if you don't mind. She is neither pink nor pale, and she never will be all mine. She learned her hands in a fairy tale, and her mouth on a valentine. She has more hair than she needs. In the sun 'tis a woe to me. And her voice is a string of colored beads, or steps leading into the sea. She loves me all that she can, and her ways to my ways resign. But she was not made for any man, and she never will be all mine. What is it you like about this poem?
Oh, the language is just brimming over with metaphor, and her choice of words, steps leading into the sea. She has more hair than she needs. There's so much about it packed into 12 little lines.
What's this poem about for you?
It's about the imagination, and it's about, I think, some kind of love that we have to be resigned to, because it's what we're going to get. And that doesn't necessarily have to be for a person. It could be for life, as in the poem More. We don't get all that we want or what we want, but it's what we have, and we love it.
The title of the collection, again, The World as We Know It is Falling Away, and that is a reference to St. Paul, 1 Corinthians 7:31, and the poem the poem in which you use this reference is Eschaton Song.
Eschaton Song. The world as we know it is falling away. Shout the good news in the dark cafe, at the Little League game, at the shopping mall, in the barn, in the boardroom, at City Hall. The world is falling away. The loss is nothing at all. Give up the old striped cat on your bed, the blast of July on your bare head, the child's glare, the woods in September, the rage whose reason you can't remember. Leave those last words unsaid. Damp your flame to an ember. Relinquish the spotless homes and your debts, your chocolate, your wine, and your cigarettes, the nameless fears that siphon sleep, all things that seem as if they'll keep. This isn't as good as it gets, but the getting won't come cheap. Abandon despair, abandon delight, the high moon through the blinds at night, gin and tonics on the deck at 4, the long kiss, the slammed door. Unlearn your appetite for this lovely tug of war. Let go of lust and pride and treasure, relentless longing, fleeting pleasure. Release the few things you do well. Meanwhile, death is going to hell. Death is going to hell to stay. The world is falling away.
This pairs well with the opening poem in Love Like a Conflagration, Mikael. It's got the same, apocalyptic kind of theme to it, and a certain sort of like confrontational verve to it, I guess. Why do you call it Eschaton Song? Why song?
Well, it's a song. You can hear it.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, up until very close to my feeling that the song was finished, it didn't have the little 2 lines stanzas in between the 4-line stanzas.
Okay.
And so it was really had kind of a rocking horse rhythm and a nursery rhyme rhythm. And that wasn't quite what I wanted. So I inserted the 2 lines in between each 4-line stanza, and they mirror the rhymes in the 4-line stanza that they follow. And they're also a foot shorter than the lines in the 4-line stanza. So that's a little break in the hobby horse rhythm.
Yeah.
And I could say some things that were different from what I was saying in the 4-line stanzas.
Yeah, I think that it makes the poem more reflective, that the change in the rhythm. Yeah. Right. It's sort of like a pause and then like an emphasis.
It's too serious a poem to sound like a nursery rhyme. Now that's not entirely bad, but in this particular, because that's shocking when it happens. When you say horrible things that sound like a children's song. But it just wasn't what I wanted here. The rest, the 4-line stanzas are kind of a litany, and the shorter 2-line stanzas are something other, more like a warning or a. They slow down the movement a little bit, and then it starts up again.
Yeah, well, there can also be something glib about a litany poem, yes. Right? Which I think that this having those bits in between, like introduces a little bit more gravitas to it.
Yes, yeah. That was my hope.
Yeah. Well, it works. Could we look at one more from the first half, which is Harm?
Harm is written about an actual event for me that happened in 1967. Oh, we were such good girls, the 4 of us, caught in Polaroid amber in our cut-off jeans. Deep Iowa summer, thrumming, humid, hot, and we posed for somebody's dad in the yellow-green light of late afternoon, in a rough-cleared spot surrounding a derelict hut. We were 14. The hut was hidden on somebody's uncle's farm, and we had 2 whole days to flirt with harm. We were all cherished, and our world was small. Books, good grades, residual make-believe. And this was our grand adventure before fall flung us at high school, where we would achieve less than we planned. We needed a close call, a way for that tight-wound goodness to unweave itself. Not really living was our fear. The dads left, and we leapt for the bootleg beer. 6 cans of hams, and 6 loose cigarettes, all stolen from the parents, one by one. Freedom within our grasp, we could forget what good girls we were and come undone. Mocking our mothers, belching sans regret, bellowing camp songs, overdoing sun, s'mores, hot dogs, a cooler full of Cokes, drunk on 6 shared beers and as many smokes. Meanwhile, in other news, a solar flare, a 6-day war, Charlie Manson out of jail, a long, hot summer of riots everywhere, a summer of love hurtling off the rails, Chicago tornadoes, in China a bomb scare, chaos and mayhem off the Richter scale, the world sick with a catastrophic syndrome. On Sunday, our parents came to take us home. What struck me about the event, decades after it happened, was how we thought we had 2 whole days to flirt with harm.
Mm-hmm.
Really, in that little hut, we were in the safest place in the world. We were safer than anywhere. And our parents really didn't want to let us do it, and they finally all gave in, and then they came on Sunday and took us home out into the real danger. So we had been safe, and then when our parents took us back to safety, really, they were taking us into the dangerous world.
Oh, that's fascinating. Wow. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Let's move into the second half of the book here. The second section is Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. What does that mean?
That's Hebrew for holy, holy, holy. That's what angels sing to God.
So I mentioned this book is divided into 2 sections, and all but one of the poems that we've read so far have been from the first section. So now that we're moving to the second section, perhaps you can tell me a little bit more about the structure of the book.
Well, the first section is quite dark.
Right.
And the second section is not dark. In fact, much of it is I think, very shows up very brightly lit, what God is like, and the mercy of God and the beauty of God, and the humor sometimes of God. It's much more gentle than the first part.
Right.
That's a truth, and I wanted to end with that truth.
Could we start with one of my favorites, the soteriologist?
This has four line stanzas, and the second and fourth are italicized because the first and third stanzas are somebody asking questions of the soteriologist, and the second and fourth stanzas are the soteriologist's reply. What do you study, study, study all day deep in your oratory, under your towers of books and Bibles, sources, translations, commentary? I study salvation, blessed and bloody. I study the saints and the adversary. I analyze and I synthesize back to the garden allegory. And are you ready? Are you ready? Nose to the books, in your vast library to lift your eyes and face salvation? Embrace the fact that fuels the theory? I hope for the best, like everybody. I balance my books with my breviary. The Lord smiles at my words and lifts me past words and into glory.
I really like the rhyme scheme in this poem. Can you tell me about that?
It's odd.
Yeah, it's really cool.
I use a little bit of repetition, so I didn't want to make it too predictable. The first line of every stanza is an off rhyme. So we have study, bloody, ready, body.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second lines have no rhyme. And the fourth lines are off rhymes: commentary, allegory, theory, glory. And so it's highly rhymed, but doesn't hit you in the face with it. That was what I tried to do.
I think that the off rhyme has a pronounced effect on the feel of this poem, but I can't describe what it is. Do you have any thoughts on the way that off rhyme functions in poetry?
I often find it much more interesting to listen to than true rhyme.
Okay.
And when I'm writing, I like off rhyme a lot. And a lot of people will say, well, sure, you don't have to search so hard for a rhyming word. You've got so many more to choose from. But for me, that makes it more difficult. That's one of the reasons I like off rhyme, because there are more words to choose from, and that makes the decision harder.
Was there any particular inspiration for this? Any person or?
No, but I heard the term soteriologist, and I had to look it up. And it's someone who studies salvation.
Right.
And I thought, how odd that is. That, I mean, salvation is a huge ongoing event happening all the time. How would you study it?
Right.
And so the poem tries to ask, okay, you're studying it, you're an expert on it, but are you ready for the real thing?
Mm-hmm.
Are you ready for salvation?
Yeah.
And the soteriologist says, I think I am.
Yeah. I buy it.
Yeah.
I think that you could totally write Hillbilly Thomist lyrics, because this would fit right in. This would fit very well with Father Thomas Joseph White's lyrics, if you've ever heard of any of his songs. There's something about not only the subject matter, but the sort of the aesthetic of it that would fit really well.
Well, that's a real compliment. Thank you.
Sure. You've got a couple of saint poems in here. One of them is Mary of Egypt Has a Dream. That's a saint that I've sort of heard of her. I'm not that familiar with her.
Well, I don't know that we know a lot of facts about her, but the legend is that, I mean, she was very, very early, and the legend is that she was quite promiscuous until she wasn't, until she had a conversion.
Mm-hmm.
So this is just me trying to think about how that might have happened, that conversion. Mary of Egypt has a dream. Unloose it, she hears, or doesn't hear, but has the meaning full and instant, there on her bed of rock and sand, where she lies quiet, forswearing love, forswearing love. Under the sun and moon, she prays for the death of need, to not desire so desperately love's counterfeit, to live in acquiescent calm and tepid peace. Decades have reeled and run within her prayer for conversion, fire to burn away the last of longing. Yet that clear night, all nights are clear in the thorny barrens, as she floats weary on the edge of wakefulness, the constellations grind to a stop their slow arcs, and words like cool water lap at her. Dearest, unloose it. Uncage love, and send love out. Set love free. Let love astound those it falls upon. Let it knock them over, but not your puny, needful love. Use mine, use mine. We too will do it. You the flume and I the freshet. You the dry bed and I the flood through you. Say yes. Tomorrow all your life's love will seem a dry prologue.
This poem seems to be about the second half of the self-denial equation, which is that self-denial is not just for its own sake. It's for the sake of allowing something else to flow through you.
Yes, I think it is, and I think that's true. And the voice, in my mind, it's the Blessed Virgin.
Okay.
Who knows? But in this poem, that's who it is. She needed that voice because she was kind of trying too hard. And she was trying to suppress her love because she felt it was not she knew the truth, which was that it was not the right kind of love, not the best kind of love. And the Blessed Virgin says, calm down. You can do this, but here's how we need to do it. You can't do it by yourself. Here's what we'll do, and it will be more love than you've ever dreamed of.
Yeah, it's a beautiful poem. Maybe we can look at the other saint poem now. Catherine of Siena to her confessor.
This one, during late spring 2020, when no one was going to church or anywhere, my husband and I would listen to Bishop Barron's Mass on our computer, on his computer. And one time he started talking about the bridge of his body, and Catherine of Siena wrote a lot about it. And just that phrase, the bridge of his body, I don't know if it's the alliteration or what, it had me. So I looked up her actual words, and she goes into detail about what she means. His is Christ, of course, and his body is a bridge. So here is Catherine of Siena to her confessor. It is the bridge of the word, the bridge of his body, that I climb panting. I cling to the bridge of his body. The tempestuous sea of this life lunges for me, and I laugh as it rages beneath the bridge of his body. The bridge has 3 steps. At the first, I kiss his feet, then his side, then his mouth, as I scale the bridge of his body. By his pierced feet I ascend to his pierced side, by his side to his gall-stung mouth, on the bridge of his body. The height of divinity, hard humbled to earth, most holy absurdity, is the bridge of his body. Spirit will save me, spirit will lift me up, but spirit owns form, and form is the bridge of his body. It is for you, he says, daughter, beloved, that I built and broke and rebuilt the bridge of his body.
That is a really cool poetic form. Is that a ghazal?
It's close. A lot of times in a ghazal, the words won't be identical at the end of each of the second lines.
Okay.
Sometimes they are. It just happened. I wrote the first stanza, and then I thought, well, I want that phrase in there as much as I can have it.
Yeah, a ghazal. That's is that from Middle Eastern poetry?
Yes.
Is it Persian?
Persia.
Okay, yeah.
I believe so.
Can you explain the bit about spirit and form?
A lot of people, I'll say certainly or mainly non-Catholics, but I'm generalizing there, think that spirit is superior to form, that the abstract is superior to the concrete, that, it's our bodies that sin, etc. And so spirit will save me, spirit will lift me up, but spirit owns form, meaning they really can't be separated.
Mm-hmm.
They're entwined in each other. And form is the bridge of his body. That is concrete. It's abstract and it's concrete, but it is no less than spirit.
I see. Let's look at Glory in the Dead of Winter.
I won't explain this one before I read it.
Okay.
Glory in the Dead of Winter. Down into the valley I rise, screaming Alleluia in bright and brittle air. This is my weather. All I hear is my heart as I climb the cold, like falling into dreaming. Coulees are rippled by a pulse of fear as I pass overhead. My fleet art the merest flick of shadow over snow. This is my weather. I am unencumbered, resting on this thermal above the butte, by concepts such as yesterday, tomorrow, now, while you, alas, your hours are numbered. My vision and my need are absolute. This white basin of sky can never hold me, and soon I will spill over, change my cry, plummet to do my existential damage. To you it will seem to take an eternity, or it will seem just a blink of your wet, dark eye in which is mirrored my inrushing image.
What sort of bird are we talking about here?
A hawk of some kind.
Okay, no particular hawk.
No, and they glide down to glide up. They rise to plummet down. It's about death, but we're cheering, I hope, for the bird, because the bird is totally beautiful. and the bird is going to kill something, but meanwhile, it's totally beautiful.
Mm.
And death comes for us all, and death doesn't need to be ugly. Death, you can think of death as something beautiful in many ways.
I hope I get killed by a hawk.
That would be a way to go, yes.
Yes, yeah, and existential damage. That's a great phrase. Okay, well, we've got a couple more before we go. How about two men address them? Another of my two men in white address them. Another of my favorites in this collection.
This two men in white address them. It references Acts chapter 1, verse 11. And these are the two men in white doing the speaking. Why do you stand here looking at the sky? Are you amazed as river passes by? Keeps on moving from the hidden past into the hidden future, yet stays steadfast, revealed in front of you? Or do you drink, face in the water, kneeling on the brink, refreshed by the real presence of the stream? If you should notice in your walking dream a brief caesura between wind and wind, a shift where atmosphere has slowed and thinned, do you lose your mind to grief? Do you despair of ever again feeling the stir of air? Or do you know nearly from your birth that wind is with us always? On this earth, being, leaving, returning, all are the same for river, wind, and Christ, whose holy name on your lips can raise the dead. We laugh at you, but mean it kindly. If you only knew.
Yeah, these kinds of poems that sort of fill in the blanks of something in scripture are always appreciated by me. Sort of like Tony Esselin's his dramatic monologues that he writes.
Yes.
And this is a similar.
Yes.
I find a similar value in this, that it's not only a good poem, but it actually helps you to sort of like read into certain things that are so brief and so unelaborated in the Gospels.
Right. We pass right over them.
Right.
We don't even notice them until somebody or something draws our attention to that line, and then what in the world is going on here?
Mm-hmm. Right. Can we finish with the final poem in this collection?
Sure. This is called Gravel. My prayers drop to the ground like so much gravel, salting the path on which it seems I travel. Who made the path before me? Others praying. Kadosh, 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 I hear them saying.
The idea of the prayers dropping to the ground like so much gravel is very interesting, because it sort of invokes this way in which we pray and we don't always see the effects of our prayers. We don't always experience them immediately. And especially if our prayers are intercessory prayers for someone else, or perhaps they're just prayers that are glorifying God and not asking for anything in particular. Sometimes we're not always seeing the good that our prayers are doing. But the idea that our prayers are enabling other people to follow on the same path is very encouraging.
Or our prayers, even more so than that, I think often we feel that our prayers, whatever type of prayer they are are just not being received, are just not being heard.
Right.
We feel a distance from God sometimes.
Well, Jane, thank you very much for coming on.
Oh, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Yeah,
Thanks so much.
So again, people, the world as we know it is falling away. Published by Lambing Press. I didn't mention that. And that is actually run by the son of Mike Aquilina, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
And thanks everyone for listening, and I'll see you next time.